Good morning and welcome to Cultural Studies Manifest Presentations, first round. I'm C. Richard King. I'm Chair of Humanities, History, and Social Sciences at Columbia College Chicago. I'm happy you were able to join us under very unusual and different circumstances this year. As many of you know, HHSS is the core and foundation of Columbia College Chicago. It offers classes in close to a dozen different disciplines and minors in 5 different areas, including Black World Studies and Latino and Latin American Studies. We have one of the oldest and I think most well-regarded cultural studies programs in the country. Offers a minor and soon we'll have a revised major. We're lucky today to have 2 of our better students presenting their work, and I will turn it over to Jafar to introduce our first speaker.
Thank you, Rich. Good morning and welcome to the Cultural Studies Capstone Forum. As Rich said, these are unusual circumstances, but we're happy to have something. My name is Jafar Xikas. I'm the core instructor for the Capstone seminar this year. And this is indeed one of the most exciting events for us every year as we share the wonderful work of our students in the Capstone thesis seminar. The Capstone course, some of you already know, is a scholarly research project that results from a course of study in the program, culminating in a semester-long research process guided in our Capstone courses. It is my distinct pleasure to convene this exciting intellectual gathering today, virtually. And on behalf of the program, I would like to welcome all of you. I don't know if we have any parents with us, but students, parents, friends, family, professors, staff, and administrators, and thank each of you for supporting our students. This kind of hard work and rewarding work is the result of support from so many people, and I would like to acknowledge some of these. In particular, I acknowledge our Cultural Studies program faculty who teach, mentor, and support our students every day. Their work is tireless, and we are very grateful. Secondly, our program, as Rich mentioned, is co-housed in the Department of the Humanities, History, and Social Sciences, Department of English and Creative Writing. And we owe our chairs, so Rich King and Dr. Pegin Powell, and our coordinator, Dr. Sean Andrews, an acknowledgement today for all their work on behalf of the program. We also benefit from the support of our academic administrator, Oscar Valdez, without whom we wouldn't have this virtual event. So thank you so much, Oscar, for all your work and also for making this Zoom meeting happen today. In addition, Krista Rogers and student workers are vital members of our cultural studies community and have our gratitude. This is always an exciting event for us because we get to see the fruits of our students' labors. For many of them, this work is a profoundly meaningful stepping stone to graduate study and career opportunities. We're fortunate that our graduates have moved on to wonderful successes and remarkable distinction in nonprofit work, in politics, in museums, in media production, in educational software design, in cultural organizations, and in very competitive graduate programs in history, education, African American studies, library science, public policy, anthropology, cultural studies, American studies, media and communication studies, and more. And so we're very confident in the future of our current small cohort as well. We're proud that Columbia has recently emerged as one of the leading centers of undergraduate research in cultural studies in North America. We're ranked as one of the best programs in cultural studies by Education Portal. And a few years ago, we were the first undergraduate program to host the International Cultural Studies Association Conference. And so far, we have hosted that conference twice. And actually, we were slated to host it at the end of this month, but that ain't happening. Maybe next year. In fact, several of our students have also presented the capstone at the conference, including some of our students presenting today. Many of our own students also study abroad. We've had cultural studies majors studying in Mexico, South Africa, South Korea, Thailand, France, and the United Kingdom. Quickly on cultural studies. Cultural studies is probably best introduced in this context as the intellectually committed, theoretically robust, praxis-oriented, radically contextualist study of culture, where the commitment to imagine a more humane, more democratic society, to imagine a better social order has always been a guiding desire in the field from its early formation in the British New Left and in the working class and adult education movements of the 1950s. In this sense, cultural studies is not just an academic discipline, it's also a project, an interdisciplinary project to construct a contextual history of the present conjuncture. Cultural studies deploys a variety of research methods and critical methodologies to explore the production, regulation, distribution, and consumption of cultural phenomenon in their larger social context. Cultural studies understands culture in a broad way as a way of life, or as E.P. Thompson would put it, as a way of struggle, and encourages interdisciplinary perspectives and methodologies, and at the same time demands a rigorous engagement with cultural texts, practices, and forms of all kinds. The two presentations you're going to hear today in different ways and to differing degrees speak to these central methodological and intellectual commitments in the field. What I should have said, the presentation you already heard, because my understanding is that people were supposed to listen to the presentations, and this is the Q&A session. So the first presentation was by Alyssa Derezycky, and the title of her project is The Abolition of the White Gaze, Balancing the Cultural Power of Racial Representation in Film. This essay, for those who had the chance to listen to the YouTube video, addresses the existence of the white gaze in American film and how it may be abolished. Alyssa Derezycky argues that the white gaze is a product of white hegemony in America, therefore taking many distorting effects. These effects include the essentializing, othering, and marginalization of people of color as a result of white normativity, centrality, and invisibility. In the creation of film, or its encoding, Alyssa claims that the abolition of the white gaze may be accomplished by either making whiteness visible or refusing whiteness its status as a norm. However, reading film of the white gaze doesn't prevent the audience from decoding through it. Using the film Moonlight as an example of an encoding that shows blackness as the norm instead of whiteness, she argues that the film's place among other critically acclaimed films suggests that the viewer's racial consciousness ultimately determines whether or not the white gaze prevails. And so now I'm gonna give it to Alyssa to say a few words and open it for questions and answers. Alyssa?
Hello. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's good to see your little box faces. Yeah, I hope that you all watched the presentation already, because I didn't prepare much to say, beyond I hope you enjoyed it. And it was a really great project to work on. I want to say thank you to Rob Watkins for being my mentor throughout the process and helping me so much. So big shout out to him. And yeah, please let me know your questions. I think Carmelo, I'm seeing a little hand waving.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. Alyssa, hello.
Hi.
Congratulations. That was really awesome to see it on the first class when you first developed it all the way to the end. That was great.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question about a phrase that you used in the presentation that I was very intrigued by. You talked about denying essentialism.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that word sort of a very suggestive word, but I also found it a little confusing. And so I wanted you to explain a little bit why you chose that word rather than being liberated from or resisting it. I'm sort of curious about why you said denying essentialism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I choose the word denying because I mean the part of the capstone that I included in the presentation is just the encoding side, but in the decoding side, I kind of talk about how audience is still projected on to films because it's like the dominant hegemony in America. So I chose the word denying while talking about the encoding side because I was trying to also acknowledge that it's still going to be there on the decoding side. So it's about like a denying a gaze that's coming towards the project as well, if that makes sense.
Got it. Got it. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Alyssa. Congratulations. I'm so proud of your work and your engagement in this project. And I also want to say it's been delightful, just absolutely delightful to have you in several of my courses. And it was clear throughout them that your rigorous work, your thoughtful work was going to lead to such a successful project. And so huge congratulations to you. And I'm grateful to have the privilege to have had you in some of my courses.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, and I'm so excited for you. So I have two questions. I'll try to keep them brief. So the first one is, I'm just very curious because I've seen so multiple examples of your work over the last few years. I'm really curious, as now looking back on your project, what you've learned about the process of research and writing itself as a cultural studies student.
Yeah, from this project specifically, I learned that like the vision's going to change so much. I mean, Carmelo knows from where it began in practicing to where it ended with this, that you really have to be open to kind of like stepping into it while you're writing and then getting out of it and reworking it. And I'm like a very linear thinker and a very linear worker. So I always I come up with the idea first and then I'm just marching towards that. And this project couldn't be that way. So with cultural studies, like the research process, it's never going to end and you're always going to learn new things as you go. And within reason, you have to be open to changing things. So that's definitely what I took away from writing this.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And then secondly, a more personal professional question is, I would like, if you wouldn't mind just sharing with everybody who's listening now, your plans for the future, because I think they seem very exciting and I'm just thrilled for you.
Yeah, totally. So I was going to be starting at NYU in Galveston School of Individualized Study in September, but I'm now deferring a year just because it's, chaos right now. But
Yes.
yeah, I'm going to be studying filmmaking, cultural studies, and media studies at Gallatin. And the goal is to kind of pursue ethical creation and representation in film that I can use as a filmmaker, but also as like a guideline as a cultural critic going into the future. So that's the plan. So yeah, we'll see in a year.
It's a phenomenal plan. I think you'll do amazing things. And by the way, you're not the first one from our cultural studies program to go into the Gallatin program and do that kind of work. So I just think it's amazing. Good for you.
It's cool to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, our next question is from Wilson Foe.
Hey, Alyssa, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Phil. How are you?
I'm really great. Congratulations. I thought your presentation was wonderful, and I loved how you broke down different strategies. And I also appreciate that you asked us to go back and look for the color blue. I know that, a lot of, in cultural criticism, there's a lot of thinking in terms of looking at things critically, but I really appreciated that you asked us to see critically also and to notice that. So I wasn't lucky enough to have you as a student, but you've been a great intern in our office. But my question is, I loved the example of Moonlight, which I think is a perfect example for your thesis. And I'm wondering, are there other examples that you can talk about briefly, any that focus on Black women, or any other examples that you think exemplify what you're talking about as a good example for de-essentializing?
Yeah, totally. So there was a documentary that was released, I want to say 2018, it might have been 2019, called Hill County, This Morning, This Evening. I wanted to stick to fiction just because that's the type of film I'm most interested in. But it's a phenomenal documentary, and the filmmaker is really adamant about rejecting the white gaze in it. So that's another example that's definitely worth watching. I think it's available on Hulu. And also recently I watched the film Atlantics, which is on Netflix. It's by I think it's a Senegalese filmmaker, and it's incredible too. So those are some other films I would definitely point to in terms of projecting the white gaze. In terms of television, I think that the show Insecure, although it's a comedy, that doesn't mean it can't do great stuff. And it is really also a great example of projecting the white gaze. And those are all examples within like Black work. So I'm sure there's a bunch everywhere else, but that's my particular interest.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, our next question is from Raquel Monroe.
Hi, Alyssa. Like everyone said, it's an outstanding presentation. Congratulations to you, and congratulations to the department for constantly turning out exemplary students. It's always exciting whenever cultural studies students are come into our courses, like in the dance department. I just want to applaud your work, and Alyssa is a shining example of what you all are doing. So congratulations to all of you. Alyssa, I want to hear a little bit about what's not here. So you picked this, you put together an awesome presentation. It has a very clear through line. I'm curious about what you left out. You know, I'm curious about your choices. I think they're great choices. I just want you to talk about that process. Or I have another one you could talk about as well. We know that Moonlight was very much so about the character and about masculinity and all, but there's so much in there that's really about femininity and vulnerability that you address. And I'm curious about the treatment of the women in the film. You talked a lot about the mother and about, you know, how we get to see her evolve and we get to see her complexity. And I can't think of the character that
Janelle Monáe's character?
Yeah. Her role was pretty significant as well. So I don't know if you've given them any thought or analysis, but if you talk about your methodology of putting it together, or both, please. Thank you.
So yeah, the first part of the presentation is like talking about white hegemony and the history of whiteness. I mean, that's definitely more robust in the paper itself, so it's kind of like a streamlined version. And then we have a section on Moonlight and decoding strategies. Encoding strategies. The other half of the Capstone goes on to talk about decoding strategies. Well, not strategies, actually, just the white gaze through decoding. So I talk about Moonlight's kind of place in culture and how well it was received, but then compare it to Green Book, which won the Oscar the next year, and how that was received actually better amongst audiences, but how also, critically and scholarly, it's been really clear that it is a film that's kind of entirely bathed in the white gaze. So then I talk about the idea that the fact that these two things can coexist in culture at the same time and be critically acclaimed suggests that the white gaze is still functioning in there. And then I talk about how we ultimately need to change the state of, our cultural consciousness if we want to get rid of the white gaze entirely. So that's what I go on to talk about. And then in terms of including other characters in the film, like Teresa, I definitely went into it knowing exactly who I wanted to talk about. So I'll be honest, I didn't put too much thought into that part of it. But something I did notice while developing this project is that a lot of films that reject the white gaze at the moment are currently about men. So there is definitely a place for women to kind of come into this space and take over a little bit.
Thank you. Our next question is from Robert Watkins.
Hi everybody. Hi, Alyssa.
Hi, Rob.
This is great work, and you should be really proud, as other folks have said. I like the way you constructed the presentation and were able to integrate the film clips. I thought it worked really well. I just wanted to say that one of the many things I like about your project is the way that it sort of speaks to the uniqueness of what Columbia is and what cultural studies is at Columbia. In terms of the way you frame it in terms of your own ideas about your future, the way you address it to and frame it as to makers and creators, I think that's really valuable, and I want to applaud that. But I just want to give you a chance to speak about a part of the project that you didn't present, and you've addressed it a little bit, but more on the decoding side. I like having just said what I said about the addressing it to makers, I like the fact that you don't dwell on the kind of negative reactions to Moonlight. And you make it more about abolishing the white gaze. But I wondered if you could speak a little bit to that kind of persistence of the white gaze that that you found in some of the reactions to Moonlight. And this maybe kind of follows on from Carmela's question about denying essentialism as well.
Yeah. In my capstone, I really talk about how, because I went through negative reviews of Moonlight on streaming platforms like Amazon, and then rating platforms like IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes. And it was very clear that people that disliked Moonlight were like against it before even watching it. And a lot of the negative feedback was like really absurd. And it was really, really clear that they didn't give the film a chance to like breathe or see it as a complex entity, which really showed me that like people are coming in with that gaze. Like, and Moonlight is not going to, because it's such an anti-essentialist piece, it's not going to make sense if you watch it through a white gaze. So I talk about denying because it's just like they're not even going to be able to perceive what the piece is if it's there. You can't fix stupid, you know? So that's kind of the deal on that end.
Okay, so we have two final questions left. One will be the next one that I saw the raised hand a little while ago was from Michelle Yates. And then we have another one from Raquel Monroe.
Alyssa, great job. I'm very proud of you. I very much enjoyed your presentation. And my question for you is, I really liked the way you talked about the symbolism as well, like exactly what Rocky had and Fo had already spoke to. Someone had spoke to the symbolism in the color blue, and so that made me think also, like, what do you think about the symbolism of water in the film? Because, right, like this idea that water is healing. And I think, you know, as someone who like looks at environmental themes in films, right? Like I frequently sort of feel like nature and the power of healing is frequently about like healing like white characters and white people, like Wild or Wall-E or Avatar. Or so I'm wondering what you think here about the healing quality of nature, especially water in the film, and the way that that functions to also subvert the white gaze, as you talk about.
Totally, yeah. Water is super prevalent. A part of the essay that I cut up for this presentation is when I talk about like the first audio input of the film, and one of it is it's a song, but before that it's actually ocean sounds. So you're right, it's absolutely like essential in the film to be there. And I think that my reading of it is that it kind of stands for freedom, so to speak, because of the times we hear it, like, you know, in the fantasy that Chiron has where he sees Kevin with a girl and it's like a very sexual thing, but it's clear that, you know, he's feeling that way. Like we hear those ocean sounds in the background. When he's in the water with Juan, where he's like finally letting loose and being comfortable, I feel like it's at times in which he's able to just like exist. And I think it's people have talked about this before, how beautiful that scene is to have, you know, two dark-skinned black men in, you know, the ocean, like the Atlantic Ocean, and having, you know, slavery be a part of that, obviously, the slave trade coming through that water. So I think it's kind of like a reclaiming of freedom, and like freedom is anti-essentialism, so to speak, under the white gaze. So that's my association with the presence of water in the film.
Okay,
Alyssa,
we have, yes, thank you.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. You just really, also the water part, I think is really important to show that Black people engage in the environment as well, that Black people enjoy water, that Black people go to beaches, that Black people, you know, do these regular, normal, everyday things that we do not ever get to see. So that, you know, just to add to that, I was wondering in terms of thinking about the gaze, because I can't remember if it was in your initial text or not. If you have, it's a really old text, but I still find it very useful. And I can't, you might have mentioned it, so I don't know, but Bell Hooks is looking back and the resistant gaze of Black people. If you've if you're familiar with that text at all, because it's a really old text, but it's really foundational. And so that might be useful as well.
Yeah, that part definitely informed, I think it's like something imaginations of whiteness in the Black imagination, something along the lines of that. So I think the text you're talking about by bell hooks, and that definitely informed the first encoding method that I talked about, the idea of like showing whiteness and making whiteness visible. And also, you know, the Sartre quote that I use in there is very similar to that idea of like the Black ability to see whiteness and have whiteness be seen. So yeah, it was definitely very informative for this piece too.
Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us today. We have another presentation that's starting in minutes, but you just have to log in through another link. So any final words, Alyssa?
Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you for your questions. And it's great to see you all. I'm sad I couldn't see you at graduation, but hopefully next year that'll be a thing. And yeah, have a good summer.
Wonderful.
Congratulations, Alyssa. That was
Congratulations.
beautiful.
Great work. Thank you.
Congrats.
Bye, Alyssa.